Today, though, we are talking about MYTCE, and because we are at the top of the hour, I would like to introduce today's presenters, Paul Robichaux and Andrew Robichaux. Let's start with Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerry. I appreciate the introduction and you setting this up. Just as a point of orientation, Andrew and I have been reworking not only MYTCE, but MyIFO and MyIP training presentations. And the conclusion that we reached is that we can do them quicker if we just stay with MyDialogue. Although he contributes dramatically to the testing and development of these tools, we think it's just a lot easier and smoother if we keep it just focused on MyDialogue. So thanks, Jerry, for introducing him, but he will be absent from today. All right, so let's get started. First of all, just a few words about what is essentially all about. is an application portal to the ICE data space. For those of you that are familiar with the integrity controls environment, you know that we maintain three broad categories of information in that space: the cluster, the journals, and the packages. The clusters are essentially sysplex inspections. One image or a dozen images in a sysplex makes no difference. We'll inspect each of those individual images, and at the end of their inspections, that is the proof that they do not or do contain some configuration vulnerability, we'll continue with a sysplex inspection where we'll check things like the coupling facility and the clock and the RNSL numbers and all these other components that need to match up across all of the images in order for them to join the sysplex as a good citizen. We refer to that activity as findings. The journals continuously monitor and record what we refer to as controlled events. They can include backups, they can include changes to defined data sets or Unix files, and essentially they help us with being able to report audit events and compliance events. And then packages are essentially configuration snapshots of images and the sysplex that are used for comparative purposes to identify changes. Now, from an organizational best practice point of view, the tools that are used to extract information from the data space are essentially interval monitors and structured reports. These are designed to support the specific needs of an organization and are, again, structured, generally set up by a TCE administrator to service the needs of the organization. On the other hand, we now have, through the My interface, a set of ad hoc reporting tools that can be used to satisfy individual needs in order to give them information on demand if they need it that way, or allow them to set up their own intervals to receive reports that satisfy whatever individual requirements they may have. They might want to report once a week or once a month that deals with the use of their logon credentials, as the case may be, in order for them to keep an eye on the use of that credential and certainly to play a role in the defense of the ZOS environment. Now, classically speaking, the types of reporting that is done that satisfies the organizational requirements is done by administrators in a top-down type approach, where they begin with controls, establish boundaries, examine journals, look at lists of potential targets for reporting, and then select from a collection of reports to be sent at some interval that they define. The reports themselves can contain information about categories. These are boundaries that we place around specific data sets or Unix files or libraries in order to watch them and to see what activity goes on within them or to prevent access to them, much like an external security manager. The content of those categories is then recorded in the journals on two broad indexes, one that deals with events and the other one that deals with classes. And then a third index, which deals with the specific user ID or job ID that is associated with an event or a class activity around a specific category. The categories themselves of activities include backups and versioning, commands, messages, and a special category that we call PSWD. PSWD, again, is this idea that users with preferred credentials should be given an opportunity to observe the use of those credentials within timeframes that they establish so that they can play a role in enforcing and adding boundaries to the security of a ZOS environment. Now, when it comes to individuals, what MY really is all about is providing an environment that is ad hoc. That is, that users can be permitted, and users would have to be permitted to use this system. But once they were using the system, they would be able to gain access to all of the information that I just described to you in order for them to be able to build and customize reports or monitor information as they see fit. Their access to the MY interface can be done directly under ICE ISPF, so they could log on to the VTAM application if they chose to do it, or they can reach the same interfaces through TSO ISPF. This is a relatively new set of functionality within the controls environment that we believe will allow you to extend the use of our tools to a broader category of user and help to improve the return on investment that you get from ongoing use of the integrity controls environment. Getting started with MY is a relatively simple task. Users can go to the command line under TSO ISPF and type *myhelp, *myTCE, or *mybat and receive instructions on exactly what they need to do in order to continue beyond that particular point. It's as simple as reading this document to gain access to the MY environment, whether it's MYTCE or MyIFO or MyIP, as the case may be if you are perhaps a network person and want to gain access to the structure and defenses that are being monitored by the TCE environment, by the ICE environment. So again, just to emphasize this, users can log on either to ICE ISPF or TSO ISPF. From that process, they can reach help documents like MyHelp or MyTCE or MyBat, and they can begin a process of using the tool interactively in order to achieve whatever objective they may have. Now, MY doesn't just support, however, users. It also supports administrators by giving them a fast path to many of the settings and control boundaries that are essential to the management of the control editor and image focus. One final point before we segue into the demonstration is that MY maintains a strict distinction between administrators and users. Administrators, whether they are the prime TCE administrator or a subprime TCE administrator, are given certain privileges and rights, particularly as it relates to the establishment of boundaries and other settings within the control editor and within image focus. Users are not allowed to reach those boundaries or those settings, and how it is that these administrators are defined is shown here in this panel. These definitions are made inside of the NSE-JRN member and specify a prime administrator, in this case user ZZZ, and sub-administrators definable up to 6 additional TSO user IDs. So let me segue out of this into an actual demonstration in this show, and we'll bring up a TSO ISPF primary menu. Now, in the past, what you would have seen here would have been the ICE primary menu, but as I mentioned, a recent enhancement to the integrity controls environment allows us to reach many of the functions, not all, but many of the functions that are certainly critical to users in their ad hoc use of the control editor and image focus. For users, it's everything. But for administrators, there are some limitations, and we're working on those, and we want to make it more broadly able to support all of the settings and all of the boundary requirements that are necessary for the full implementation of either the control editor or image focus. Now on the command line here under TSO, I can type TSO $command line interface CLI, comma, asterisk MYTCE. And what this will do is display for us some information. Now the first piece of information that pops up here, and this is individualized now, so this is for individual users. What it's saying is that you set up an interval to build a report for you, and we've identified that there is a new one that has just recently been created for you. And so that's the first heads up that you would get as you logged on. After passing through that message, just PF3 or press enter, you'll find these panels. And now these panels on first blush seem to be somewhat complicated. So I just want to take a moment here and explain to you what you're seeing here and how they should be used. There are going to be in total 6 different panels, and those panels are navigated by the little buttons that you see down at the bottom. These things we sometimes call bubbles and buttons. And you can see the first one where the cursor currently resides, that's this one right here, is highlighted in yellow. And that's to indicate to the user that this is where they left off in the last session they were in when they were logged on to MYTCE. Now to navigate, they can either use PF3 to move from one bubble to the next, and you can see me doing that now, or at any point they can simply select a bubble and go directly to that panel. So navigation from panel to panel is essentially accomplished either by PF3 or by indicating a preference by putting the cursor on the appropriate bubble and pressing enter. Now, the panel is broken down into 3 distinct areas. The first area up at the top, which we refer to as delivery settings, deal essentially with a user's request to have the reports that they're going to establish to be delivered to them via email, and also gives them the option of being able to say, and I only want that email if there is a change in the report that makes it different from the last report that you emailed to me. I can put my subject here, and I can put my email address. But in order to support ad hoc requests from the boss, as an example, who might say, gee, I thought that was an interesting report that you created, why don't you send me a copy of it? You can simply use the caret pointing to the right and press enter and enter the appropriate email addresses here. Up to 2 copies can be sent to 2 separate email addresses. Now, if I check one of these, like this first one, and I return to the previous menu, you'll notice that the caret has turned red. This is to indicate to you as a user that there is a carbon copy that is not necessarily in your view when you first log on. It could be in your view, but it might not necessarily be in your view, and we wouldn't want you to not notice that and perhaps turn it off if in fact that was something that was appropriate for you to do at that time. The next section is headed Interval Settings. These interval settings, as described, deal with the delivery of the reports that you are going to create to you either in your report registry or by email or both on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. If you request them daily, they would be delivered on a certain time frame. So in this case, 9:49, and in this case, we're asking for the reports to be created every 12 hours. We could simply blank this out, and in this instance now they would be reported every 24 hours, so essentially once a day. We can also establish a requirement for reports to be delivered to us on a weekly basis. I just activated that because I am an administrator. And in this case, now reports that I request would not only be created daily, but I would also get a report at 12:30 weekly on Monday, or on Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or all of those days if I chose to select them. I could also do the same thing for a month if I wanted that. I could say, hey, I don't want delivery daily. I don't want delivery weekly. I would prefer to get my delivery on monthly. And now at 12/12, at the end of each month, I will get a report. Now these settings that are here in section 1, delivery settings, and section 2, interval settings, are consistent from one panel to the next, with the exception that the selection, that is, do you want it daily, weekly, or monthly, can vary from panel to panel because of the fact that we have the ability to aggregate your requests and deliver them to you as you desire. Now, you'll notice as I page through this that some of these are actually requests that say, hey, I wanted this daily, but daily's now turned off. Guess what? You're not going to get that report. It's just simply not going to happen. But for an administrator, they could go to the command line and type the word mail and press enter, and they could see at a glance all of the users that have requested reports to be delivered on a daily basis that now will no longer get those reports because they've simply been turned off. And so good information for an admin to have before they take that action. If they chose to from this point forward, they could develop an email and send it to all of these players individually to let them know for whatever reason mail has been turned off. Now, an admin can also take additional action. They can, if they choose to, turn off all monitors by simply unchecking this. And in this case, what would happen is that all monitors would be suspended. There would be no more monitoring activity. There would be no more emails sent out. There would be nothing until it was essentially turned back on again. Now, admins are the only ones that can perform those actions. Users can select daily, weekly, or monthly. They can't set the time, and users are not able to suspend the monitors at any point in time. Okay, so now that we have sort of a brief understanding of how this works, let me, telling me that I have a monitor turned off and it won't let me go forward. All right, let's see here. Monitor is active, but there's no messages selected. Nothing is selected down here. So let me put this on. We do a lot of field checking. that obviously in this case is going to drive me cuckoo as I attempt to get out of this. Let me just help myself here and exit from this if I can. Not even sure what I did wrong. I may need more training than I'm trying to give to you. Hold on just a second. That could potentially be a bug, and so I made a note of that. Come back in again. TSO. Somebody told me once it's always good to have that because it makes people realize that this must be a live demonstration, which it is. Okay, TSO, command line interface. Now I haven't picked up my report yet, so I'll continue to get this message until I actually visit my report registry and look at the last report. We do this because monitors are only as good as the people who examine their content. And so until you actually do it, we're going to keep popping this message up to make sure that you know there's something new out there that you likely ought to go take a look at. Okay, so we're back again. Sorry about that. Now we're going to switch over to this panel because this is pretty much the business end of TCE. This part here at the bottom, now we're in the third section, on this particular panel deals with backups. And we might want to ask a question right now. We might want to ask this question. Were there any new backups that were taken in the month of March? Now we can see down here at the bottom that one of the criteria that we can specify is that we want information only after March the 1st. So let's take a look and see if there were any new backups taken during that time frame. And it comes back and it says, no, there wasn't anything for us to see, so 0 items. This is what we call an active worksheet. I'll come back to that in just a moment. We'll select something else now. We'll select meta detail, and we'll drop back a month and say, well, was there anything since February the 1st? And we'll take a look. And no data sets match that criteria. Now we'll back up, and now we'll ask it, is there anything since January 1st? And now it comes back and it says, yeah, by the way, we did have some first backups that have taken place since January the 1st. And here is, if you would, the name of the data set right here. And here are the names of all the members that are in that data set that we picked up a new backup of since the 1st of January. And then we actually had a Unix library that was picked up as well that we have its backups also at this time. So lots of flexibility to be able to choose a specific date and time. Backups aren't quite as interesting as perhaps events that take place in the control journals environment. We can look at these events. Now I've moved forward one panel to the event journals, and we're going to first look at activity that has taken place in the month of March. So the boss comes in and says, hey, okay, well, what did the control editor tell us about the control boundaries that we established as it relates to data sets and files and libraries during the month of March? And you say, okay, well, let's just have a quick look. You set the category as the characterization component. You set the date to March 1st, and we go ahead and run this. Now, an active matrix is essentially an interactive TSO ISPF environment that allows you to probe down into things a little deeper than you would be able to if you had essentially just a report and were looking at it in browse or edit. Um, these names are category names, and the TCE administrator is the one who establishes the category names, and it may not be necessarily clear what these categories actually represent. So because this is an active environment, we could put the cursor under sequential reports and press enter, and it'll come back and it'll tell us that sequential reports as a category contains these 5 different data sets, and in this case these are sequential data sets. When we PF3 back, we could then say, well, I see a number next to that, 10, so there's been 10 events in that category since the 1st of March. Let's take a look and see what they were. So we use a process we call grouping. We've grouped together the 10 different activities that have taken place in this particular data set. Now we can list those. Now we can see that of those, there are 63 different specific items that need to be examined that took place. So we go ahead and list those. And now we can see all of those particular items. Every item here represents some access to one of the control files that is included within the category that we refer to as sequential reports. So we can swap the panels back and forth in order to be able to see not only the data sets that were impacted, but also the name of the category, assuming that this panel could also be used for mixed categories and mixed data sets within a single category. Now, we can move further beyond this point because we can actually edit a file from here. So if we had the appropriate authority to do it, we could actually make a change here. I always like to change the G to an H, press PF3. And when we do, what will pop up is what's referred to as a descriptor. Now, this particular category and the files and data sets that are in that category have been defined to be network related. And so the panel that pops up is one that emphasizes that this particular component is likely under the control of the Network Operations Center, and that they want to keep track of all the changes that go on in this particular file, and they're doing it with this panel. So this panel can request additional information beyond that that would normally be collected by TSO ISPF stats. We have our own mechanism for collecting the same stats, but other information can be added here as well. There's an API that underlies this that would allow you to interface all of this information directly back to whatever configuration management environment you have. When I hit PF3, I'll get a panel that says, do you want to do this? The answer is yes, we do. And so when we're done, we're back into our environment. We had 63. Now when we come back, assuming everything works the way it should, I don't get stuck again, we now have 64. So the last one that we picked up has now been recorded in the journal, instantly available for reporting and monitoring purposes, for alert purposes. The network group might have put an alert into the controls environment that said, if you see somebody change this, we want an email, send it to us so we know what's going on. So back out into the panel again, one of the things that we tried to do here with the My interface is give you some flexibility as a user to change the way in which you categorize or classify information. So now we can look at this on the basis of event classification. rerunning this to ask the question, what's happened since the 1st of March? And we can see we've still got our 55 items. Actually, we picked up one additional one. We can see different events and types. Again, this may be a bit alien to people. So you can put the cursor under that and press enter, and it will explain to you what that particular heading actually means, what that event type is. So in this case, an attempted edit failed due to some unspecified or unclassified action. If we PF3 back and we take a look at this one, again, this is an update to a member in a controlled data set. And obviously, because of the word first here, this is attempting to say to us this is the first time that particular item has actually been updated. Same thing for save, update to a member in a controlled data set. Again, since it doesn't say first, it means that this is the first, or this is one of 32 different events that took place. And of course, we can drill down into all of these and get a list and proceed further. Now, if we want a report, we can go to the command line and type report, and we will get a report. Now, this is a kind of summarization, if you would, of the events that have taken place. But we can go back and type report, PF3 again. We can go back and type report detail and press enter. And now we'll get an expanded view of that information in a form that we refer to as metadetail. When we press PF3, as I did earlier, we're placed into the move copy utility, the standard ISPF utility that we can use essentially to move this data set that contains the report content I just showed you, or copy it or do whatever you want with it from this point forward. PF3 back again, and now we're back out into our panel. We can make those same kinds of distinctions directly from the panel itself by overriding the active matrix into meta report or some other summarization form. Now, I mentioned earlier that TCE administrators benefit here as well because they can get to TCE controls and settings. If they type cats on the command line, they'll go directly to a panel that refers them directly to all of the control categories that are currently actively being monitored by the control editor. And we can see the categories here. We can see the data sets and libraries that are being monitored. All the way down to load libraries. It's a relatively new feature in the controls environment for us to be able to monitor load libraries as well as partition data sets and Unix files and sequential data sets. They can also type BNDS on the command line and go directly to the panels that are used to set up the boundaries that are so important to the achievement of system programming best practices, that is the monitoring of your ZOS sysplex. Data sets, load libraries, Unix files, commands, and messages. Back out again. Definitely have some sort of a got it. Sometimes you have to read the messages carefully to understand what they're trying to tell you. Different messages, different commands can be monitored for. Here we see the monitoring activity that applies to set commands and miscellaneous commands, all of which can be monitored individually or collectively, as the case may be. We can see activity here that deals with messages that are appropriate in our environment And I think I see clearly what's wrong with this. There are no messages currently being defined in the NSEJRN member. Someone's made a change there, I guess. And that's why it won't let me move to the next panel. It's trying to tell me that if I want to use this, then I'm going to have to specify some activity in the NSEJRN member in order to be able to do that. Okay, so we turned it off so we wouldn't get stuck in it again. And you'll notice that the little bubble down at the bottom has turned red. This indicates that a monitor is off. It's not doing any more work. Monitors can act independently of each other. Here we can see various TSO user IDs. I can put the cursor under mine and ask it, have I been doing anything since, let's say, 3:15? So I might have somebody working out there that I want to monitor. If I am a TCE administrator, I can monitor their activity and see what they have been up to. You can see all of these things that I have been up to. I can also do the same thing for anyone else that has a TSO user ID that I'm interested in that might be permitted into the integrity controls environment. But if I'm a user, if not, I'm not an administrator, but I'm a user, I can only see activity that relates to me. I can't see anybody else's activity. The same thing is true for what we refer to as PSWD. PSWD, again, is this special function within the integrity controls environment that allows users to stay in touch with the use and reset and expiration of their credential, typically a privileged credential. They can monitor when the credential is used for logging on. In my case, that process begins at 6 o'clock at night and continues until 8:30 in the morning. I can ask for similar monitoring of the reset of my credential. And I can also ask for notification of expiration. 10 days, 5 days, 1 day, on 0 day, the day that it actually expires, and get an email that tells me that that expiration has taken place. I can, if I'm an administrator, I can also monitor the logon activity, expiration activity, and reset activity of all the individual users that are in the system, much like I can their user ID, in order to see what is happening and what is taking place on a user-by-user basis. Okay, so let me go back now to my PowerPoint. I've included in it some additional help panels that are there. A panel that describes the various 3 sections that need to be dealt with, and a help panel there accordingly. Just a reminder of the power of the interface that allows you to access both backups and event journals, specify beginning and ending dates, and also specify that you only want new activity. This is the first of a series of webcasts that we give on a repetitive basis. I want to remind you before I turn it over for questions that weekly we do have a webcast that deals with monitoring your critical Unix files and other data sets. One on cybersecurity that deals with our ability to monitor both the construction and the defense of the components of your TCP/IP stack. And coming next week, for the first time, will be my IFO training, so that if you're an image focus user, we're going to show you the My interface that deals with image focus. So that ends it for me, Jerry. I'll turn it back over to you to see if we have any questions today.